It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. More police officers injured as two groups clash in Plymouth and rioters throw rocks, bottles and fireworks. Migrants are moved from the targeted hotels and police promise to track down criminals.
Please be assured, if you were there, we will find you.
Tonight, we'll look at how the misinformation is spreading online and fueling the violence. And in Southport, 1 week on from the attack that killed 3 young girls, the community comes together to mourn. Also tonight, global stock markets continue to plummet over fears of a US recession. And celebrations in Paris tonight as Team GB's Keely Hodgkinson wins gold in the 800 metres. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. The police have promised to hunt down those responsible for the days of violence across the UK. There have already been nearly 400 arrests, but that hasn't deterred people. These are the live pictures in Plymouth tonight, which started with police trying to keep apart two groups which had gathered. And now disorder has erupted between some rioters and officers. Well, the Prime Minister is promising a standing army of specialist officers to tackle the riots. Sky's home editor, Jason Farrell, has tonight's first report, which begins with those scenes in Plymouth tonight.
Another city, another scene of rage and violence, this time Plymouth. To begin with, two rival groups, anti-migrants and anti-fascists, separated by a road and a line of police. There was an exchange of chants, then missiles, then the inevitable. More disruption for the police to marshal and contain.
How difficult is this to police tonight? Off the scale. It's off the scale today. With the resources we've got, it's difficult. It's difficult.
While in Rotherham, they were still assessing the damage, not from a protest, but from people who came to break and burn. Criminals who smashed their way in and set fire to a hotel where asylum seekers live. Some staying here were so petrified they spent the night in Woodland.
It makes me sad to be English, really, because this is the kind of people all over the world want to see of us.
None of this had to happen, basically. None of it had to happen. It's misinformation. That's what it is. And violence just is never the answer for these kinds of things.
So far, the government has rejected suggestions to recall Parliament and to deploy the army. This happened in the new Defence Secretary's constituency.
This is devastating. This was an area that was seized with shock and fear throughout yesterday. It's the police's responsibility to respond first, and currently they've got the means to do it.
The warning to rioters is that they will pay a price.
If you were there, we will find you, and you will be held accountable for your part in yesterday's violence. To our local communities, yesterday was a dark day, and we know this was felt across our county.
When riots spread from the capital in 2011, 3,000 people were arrested and more than a third went to jail, many with long sentences. The criminal justice system and the prisons are more stretched now. It will be harder to do. But the man who was chief prosecutor then is now Prime Minister.
We'll ramp up criminal justice. There have already been hundreds of arrests. Some have appeared in court this morning. I've asked for early consideration of the earliest naming and identification of those involved in the process, who will feel the full force of the law.
This is the new government's first big domestic test, their first Cobra meeting, which ended with the Met's chief Tetchley grabbing a Sky News microphone. These are tense times. Here in Huddersfield, just a few social media posts from apparent far-right activists caused police to release a public warning and increase their presence at the train station. What's happening across Britain isn't yet on the scale of the 2011 riots in terms of the number of people involved, but one factor makes it already worse: human targets, the fact that this is fuelled by intolerance. Fearing trouble, local Asian businesses closed in Huddersfield. Some Asian men travelled here from other towns, ready to confront any protest. This man, who didn't want his face shown, came from Leeds.
We don't want this. This is our country just as much as it is theirs. And, you know, Muslims are not bad. Our religion, Islam, it's not bad. You know, we're good people. We've got to live here, you know, and our children have got to grow up here, and we don't want this for them. You know, we're not in a war zone, you know. This is Britain, you know. And,
feel like a war zone?
This last week it has felt like a war zone, yeah. It's, like I say, it's very heightened. You know, people are really scared.
Already, Middlesbrough and other towns have seen Asian and far-right nationalists fighting on the streets. And in so many other places, communities are on edge. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Let's take you now to our West of England correspondent, Dan Whitehead, who's in Plymouth tonight. And Dan, when we came to you previously, you were in a situation where there was no police presence at all.
Yeah, that has changed now, Gillian. You can see that the riot officers have made their way up to the edge of the Plymouth Hoe here, sort of 500 metres or so further away from where that protest initially began. And there have been clashes here between groups of Asian men and whites. We've been hearing chants of Allah Akbar. We've been seeing stones being thrown. We've been seeing slabs broken up from the sidewalk and thrown as well. It got particularly violent at one stage, and now we have a couple of dozen riot officers who have managed to come in and separate. But I think this is the story of the evening tonight here in Plymouth, some 4 hours on from when this started, is that how this protest has splintered, and particularly now, you know, you've got smaller groups arguably, but still just as violent, spreading out into parks, into side roads, and that's proving incredibly difficult for the police. And we heard in that clip there from Ron's command saying that this is an incredibly difficult situation, that it's off the scale with the resources that they have got. We've heard from Devon and Cornwall Police, they have said that they have got 150 police officers out on the streets of Plymouth here tonight. And although the protest has dispersed, it is still violent. Tension is still high, and that is proving difficult for the officers here. They have been doing an incredibly difficult job to keep these groups which are splintering separate, and they have not always succeeded. But as we heard from Bronze Command, they say that this isn't protest, this is simply violence, and that's what we're hearing from the local MPs, from the locals here. I just chatted to one man who said this is just mindless violence, and that's what we saw at the weekend, and it's again what we're seeing here tonight on the streets of Plymouth. We know that 3 police officers have been injured. There have been a number of arrests. We saw police dogs being used, bricks being thrown, fireworks being set off, and as you can see here, we're just getting those groups splintering off into parks. The hope, of course, will be that eventually they give up as the night gets darker. But at the moment, there's no sign of that, and it's proving an incredibly difficult situation for Devon and Cornwall Police.
And at one point, Dan, the missiles being thrown, you were able to identify literally half a brick that was thrown that your security picked up and handed to the police. I think we've lost communication with Dan. Yes, we have. We have. We'll come back to Dan throughout the course of the evening as the situation unfolds in Plymouth. But in the meantime, riots first broke out the day after the stabbings in Southport, where police clashed with the mob outside a mosque. Violence spread to Hartlepool, Aldershot and Manchester the next day, and more than 100 people were arrested for unrest outside Downing Street. Then, on Friday, buildings and vehicles were set alight in Liverpool and Sunderland, and another mosque targeted. Things escalated into the weekend with riots in at least 11 locations across England and Northern Ireland, the worst of it in Bristol and Liverpool. And yesterday saw mobs fight with police in Middlesbrough and Solihull, while hotels housing asylum seekers were targeted in Rotherham and Tamworth. Well, a number of countries are advising against travel to the UK as the situation becomes more tense. Sky's communities correspondent Becky Johnson has been speaking to Asian groups which have taken to the streets in Birmingham today.
There'd been rumours of a far-right protest in Birmingham, so dozens of Asian men decided to get here first. Many were wearing balaclavas or face masks, one man armed with what appeared to be a bat. This had been organised by men who've had enough of the violence towards Muslims.
This is now another group that's just been set up.
Earlier, this community activist showed me a WhatsApp group with over 1,000 members wanting to stand up to racist mobs.
Hopefully the police would take care of us, but if they don't, we would obviously be willing to take care of ourselves.
And how far would you go to do that?
Well, me personally, you know, I'm not one of those elements that would go, I'm not willing to go to jail.
Amidst the anger, he's been urging restraint.
The message that we are sending out as a community is that don't take the law into your own hands.
As protesters gathered and we attempted to report live, it became clear the media weren't welcome.
A sense of anger, I think you can hear there.
We decided to leave, but as we drove away, this man, armed with a knife, attempted to slash a tyre on one of our vans.
He's going to slash the tyres.
Oh, he's going to do the same to us. The fury we witnessed has been caused by riots like this. An asylum hotel in Tamworth was set alight by a far-right mob. Trapped inside, asylum seekers filmed from the top floors. As outside, racist graffiti was left on the walls. By morning, the migrants had been moved away. Attempts underway to erase what had happened, but for many, the damage has been done. This nearby shop is run by a couple who now feel under threat.
Not many Asian live in Tamworth. We do feel a bit scared. We've never felt like this the way we are feeling now.
This hotel has been housing asylum seekers for years. The question now for those who provide support for the migrants is should they return once the hotel is repaired.
If the hotel closes down as a result of the violence, then does that give those with a particular view a win, or is it about obviously we want to make sure people are safe.
And that is the fear, with tension across communities still building by the day. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Birmingham.
A number of people have appeared in court today in connection with the riots. That includes the people involved in the violence that broke out in Southport. It was 1 week ago today that a Taylor Swift dance workshop was attacked in Southport. Alice Da Silva Agua, who was 9 years old, BB King, 6, and Elsie Dot Stankham, 7, died after being stabbed last Monday. Hundreds turned out today to pay tribute to them. Sky's chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam reports.
A week on, in Southport, this was, they said, sending bubbles up to heaven in memory of Elise, BB and Elsie. It was also to help the children trying to understand what happened here. It was organised by Kylie, whose daughter went to school with BB.
Tonight is the start of the kids knowing it's okay to cry. I don't think we'll ever come to terms with it, but start to express their emotions more so that they're not all held inside. It's hard, more so when you've got children. We're here in one sense trying to promote a happy remembrance for those children, and then they're seen on the news, there's other things going on, and it's soul destroying. It's awful.
Who can have expected the horror at a summer holiday dance class would have unleashed what it has? But it was here in Southport that the first of the violence flared among an angry mob, scenes that have now spread across the country. Many of those involved have been arrested, facing the promised full force of the law. And with the increasing number of arrests, now the court process has begun. Among those appearing here at Liverpool magistrates today, a number who are alleged to have been involved in that disorder in Southport last Tuesday night. One accused of assaulting an emergency worker. Others are accused of being involved in the disorder in Liverpool on Saturday. One of them, a 14-year-old boy. In the midst of everything, Southport has to face that it was some of their own neighbours involved in that violence here. Raf Monroe is offering support from the council to those who come to mourn. As a child, he saw Liverpool burn in the Toxteth riots. He then went to war in the army. This week, though, has been tough.
I had one guy on Friday, huge craggy guy, crying his eyes out, saying, "I don't know what to do," and I gave him a big hug and I said, "You're not supposed to know what to do in a time like this." I'm worried. I said to you about service in Iraq and looking for weapons of mass destruction, and there are moments I felt here. I've been back in Britain 3 years now, and there are moments here where I felt there is a weapon of mass destruction, and we know what it is. It's this rhetoric and this hate.
There are flowers too now at the schools of those 3 young girls, as if we needed any reminding, whatever else is happening, of those who won't be coming back. Greg Milam, Sky News, Southport.
The Prime Minister has warned anyone whipping up violence online will face the full force of the law. Downing Street also criticised tech billionaire Elon Musk, who wrote on social media that civil war is inevitable in the UK. But how does what is said online translate to violence in the streets? Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire has been looking at the evidence.
Chaos across the country and violent, bloody results seized upon online to shift the narrative.
He needs an ambulance, so he does.
On X, formerly Twitter, the far-right influencer Tommy Robinson falsely said these men had been attacked with knives. Just half an hour later, Staffordshire police put out a statement saying, "We can confirm this information is false and no stabbings have been reported to police, despite videos fueling speculation on social media." Or Sunday in Rotherham, a far-right organisation alleged again on X that migrants inside the besieged hotel had a gun. Nothing of the sort has since been reported or stated by police, and that too was reposted by Robinson. This is real-time misinformation, events being repurposed, reshaped, almost as they happen by online influencers, in turn exacerbating the situation back on the ground.
And much of that is down to Robinson's expanded reach on X. If you look at this is his follow account on Twitter, as it was called. He was obviously not allowed to post or tweet then, and since he's been allowed back on, his followers have surged more than 200,000 over the last 30 days. And that means when it comes to a tweet like this, obviously incorrect. This is reaching many more people. This hasn't been taken down. There's been no note attached to it to warn people that this is misinformation. And some of that may be because of who's dealing with Robinson, the man who put him back on the platform, the man who owns the platform, Elon Musk, replying to this tweet, quoting Tommy Robinson. And Elon Musk has sort of doubled down on this. He wrote, "Civil war is inevitable," referring to the UK. That may explain why some of the tone online has changed. Look at this. This shows tweets related to Southport and anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant sentiment. We saw this obviously spike during the attack, and it seems to have come down. But actually, what's happened is something different. We've got this line, and this just shows general protest plus anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant sentiment. That has overtaken this line now. Southport itself being forgotten. We see that reflected finally in the types of site being targeted by protesters and rioters. You can see the type of site here. Instant red, that is responding to something. Then that mosque protest on the second day. Then immigration starts to come in green, and it becomes more of a concern. Black is general. And what we see planned ahead, if we look at the Telegram accounts we've been monitoring, this is what's planned for the next week. It's obviously a lot bigger. Not all of these may happen. This is a plan. It is not reality yet. But there is a clear focus on immigration-related sites. That is a change.
In a post on X, the Prime Minister said on Monday that he would apply criminal law online as well as offline, and that attacks on Muslim communities would not be tolerated. That prompted Musk to respond directly, saying, "Shouldn't you be concerned about attacks on all communities?" He is not backing down. This is a uniquely challenging situation, when the offline and the online worlds are colliding and shaping each other in unpredictable ways. Tom Cheshire, Sky News.
Let's return to our correspondent in Plymouth for us tonight, Dan Whitehead. What's the situation now, Dan?
Yeah, Gillian, well, really, the main group of, up to 1,000 protesters is now splintered out. We've ended up on the Hoe here at the top of Plymouth. You can see behind me there is still a group of protesters confronting a line of riot officers right here on the seafront. And this really is feeling like the almost end point. There's still a lot of tension here, but it is calming down somewhat compared to the scenes we saw in the centre of Plymouth earlier. This is clearly not finishing anytime soon, but I think this has been a far more significant protest in Plymouth than a lot of people predicted today. It has been violent. There have been officers injured. There have been arrests. There have been rocks and bricks thrown at all sides of the protests, and it really has reflected the tensions that we've seen over the last week. I think what has been most stark tonight in this protest are those words from the Bronze Commander, simply saying how difficult this has been for them, and with the resources that they've had, it has been a real challenge for them. And that standby army that we've heard from the Prime Minister perhaps hasn't been in full force here tonight. And that has proved difficult for Devon and Cornwall Police, who have done a very difficult job here in keeping the protest groups apart. 150 officers on the ground here in Plymouth. And although there is still tension here, some 4.5 hours after the start of the protest, the crowds are starting to thin out.
Dan, thank you. In other news, stock markets around the world have fallen sharply amid fears that the US economy is heading for recession. London's premier stock market index, the FTSE 100, suffered its biggest fall since July last year. And just 3 months out from the US election, it's not the news Kamala Harris was hoping for. Sky's US correspondent James Matthews reports.
Monday morning at the New York Stock Exchange, and the sound and smiles came as standard. For long enough, the US economy has rung resilience.
We opened more doors for economic opportunity. We've created 13 million new jobs. We have the strongest economy in the world without exception.
But a picture of growth and recovery has begun to show the cracks. Worse than expected job numbers have combined with manufacturing data to show economic weakness, prompting fears of a recession.
People lost sight of three things. One, low-income households running out of pandemic savings. Two, people maxing out their credit cards. And three, small businesses getting squeezed. And now this weakness from below is starting to spread through the economy.
The graphic showed how global markets were spooked by the spectre of US recession. There were sharp falls in Asia and in Europe. Big tech names like Apple took massive hits as investors lost confidence in the much hyped potential of artificial intelligence. The tech-heavy Nasdaq index saw its steepest fall in 2 years. Key to what happens next will be the actions of the US Federal Reserve. The American central bank may now embark on aggressive interest rate cuts, which could impact on the steady approach in the UK and elsewhere. It's an economic story anchored in the United States that plays into its politics. Donald Trump has called it the Kamala crash. Given the implications worldwide, it's the issue in which everyone has a stake, everywhere, election or not. James Matthews, Sky News, in Washington.
Bangladesh's Prime Minister has resigned and fled the country after weeks of protests that spiralled into deadly violence. Sheikh Hasina took a helicopter to India not long before crowds stormed her official residence. Local media is reporting she plans to travel to the United Kingdom. To Paris now, and it's been a golden night on the athletics track for Team GB. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris joins us from Paris. Rob.
Yes, Team GB up to 12 golds now here in Paris, with 2 more won today. The latest in the Athletic Stadium in the 800 metres final by Keely Hodgkinson, and she managed to hold off her rivals, shaking off late attacks to manage to upgrade the silver she won in Tokyo at the age of 19 to now become an Olympic champion. Tears in her eyes at the end, and memories being evoked of Dame Kelly Holmes winning the same final 20 years ago in Athens. This, the first athletics gold for GB since Rio 2016, and it followed success in the velodrome with the first track cycling medal for GB of these games. It was won by the women's team sprint, and it was the successful Joy for Katie Marchant, Sophie Catewell and Emma Finucane, setting 3 world records, including in the final to beat New Zealand. And also today, bronze and silver in the kayak cross, as well as bronze in the mixed triathlon, all taking GB up to 42 medals as we enter the final week of these games. But at times, Paris 2024 has felt overshadowed by a debate over gender eligibility, and it's been fuelled further today by a banned boxing organisation holding a bizarre briefing. And they gave contradictory accounts of the testosterone tests, if they even did exist, that Olympic chiefs have called flawed. These are the boxing officials banished from the Olympics, who came to Paris anyway and brought bedlam.
Woman, why you attack me? Woman.
Stoking confusion over gender eligibility of fighters rather than providing promised clarity.
This was brought about by what happened in the ring with the Italian and Imam Khalif. I've been discussing, but stop.
This Olympic sideshow turning into a shambles. Officials and their systems in meltdown. The International Boxing Association's leader appearing from Russia to rant about the IOC. But remember, at the heart of this are 2 women, Lin Yong-ting and Iman Khalif. Their right to compete as women being publicly doubted.
This is a question I'm asking myself. Why now? I was greatly affected because, honestly, it wasn't an easy thing to go through at all. It was something that harms human dignity.
Khalif and Lin disqualified by the IBA during last year's World Championships, and still unverified claims over the presence of XY chromosomes. An attempt to explain only drawing more questions. Given the fact the first tests on these 2 boxers were conducted in 2022, why did you wait until 2023 for the next test and the results only announced when the boxers were on for medals?
It was something new for us in the sport. So one result coming from one laboratory, the result coming out and moving on to the next competition. We were waiting for the next tournament to then do the necessary testing.
This has been a chaotic news conference by a scandal-plagued boxing governing body with rambling attacks on Olympic officials while claiming to be protecting women's sport. Will it expose fighters who've already received so much abuse to more hatred? It went on for 2 hours. You know, some people see this as a bit of a farce. What? This whole event today? What? Does it not seem a bit of a farce? This all an attempt to dismantle the credibility of the Olympics, stirring more disruption before the boxers return to the ring. Rob Harris, Sky News, Paris.
Well, let's stay with the Olympics and 2 medals for Team GB in the brand new Olympic event, kayak cross. It was silver for Joe Clark and bronze for Kimberly Woods. Our correspondent Ashna Horanag has been to Britain's home of kayaking, Lee Valley Whitewater Centre.
Imagine being dropped off a 2-metre ramp in a kayak into unforgiving white water and then racing through raging rapids to beat your competitors to the finish line. This is kayak cross, and for the first time, it's an Olympic event.
It's super exciting. It adds a little bit more pizzazz than slalom maybe does. With the head-to-head element of it, there's actual physical competition. It's a bit gladiatorial, like first across the line, last man standing, sort of like if someone's ahead of you, you beat them. You have to go and get them.
It is unforgiving, with pushing and shoving allowed. As these up-and-coming athletes at the GB training ground demonstrate, it's dynamic disorder with a 360 dunking in the middle. But as one former Olympian knows, there's plenty of tactical skill in the frantic dash for the finish.
In kayak cross, obviously, you're having to read the moment where the other competitors are around you and which direction you're going to go, which upstream gate you're going to take, how you might take it on if you're going to have to overtake somebody. That's not something you have to do in slalom. That start ramp is incredibly scary in terms of having 3 other paddlers around you. You're not knowing what any of the others are planning to do necessarily. You might be getting pushed off in one direction the minute you're going down that ramp by somebody else.
As events got underway in Paris, their friends nervously watched on. Reigning world champion Kimberly Woods struggled at the final gate. A loss in momentum allowed her opponents to surge past her, but a disqualification meant she clinched her 2nd bronze of the Games.
And that means that Kimberly Woods is back on the podium.
her teammate Jo Clark, who went into the event the heavy favourite with 3 world titles to his name, secured silver. A moment of pride for those who've seen their relentless commitment.
They're thinking about nutrition, they're thinking about their psychology, they're thinking about their goals, they're thinking about reviewing sessions. It's not just the hour that you see them on the white water, it's everything that goes around that.
That, a recipe for an Olympic medal in an event that is brutal, high-octane fun. It's a sport that's built on speed, spray, and now winning spirit. Ashen Haranag, Sky News in Hertfordshire.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and the Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott. Well, amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Daily Mail, anger over Elon Musk, who claimed that civil war is inevitable. We'll be right back. Do stay with us. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. There's been further protests in Plymouth and Birmingham today as the country braces for more potential unrest in parts of England. The Prime Minister has vowed to deploy special police units and warned prosecutions will not be limited to those on the street. It's been a torrid day for Wall Street as fears over a US economy facing recession send stock markets tumbling across the world. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the front of the Metro focuses on the Prime Minister's plan for a standing army of specialist police officers to crack down on far-right gatherings. A similar story on the front of the Eye, but it also includes warnings over a lack of police officers. The Express leads with Met Commissioner Saroli dodging questions about police handling of the riots. The Daily Mail focuses on the row on X between Sir Keir Starmer and billionaire Elon Musk, who tweeted that civil war is inevitable. The Times also draws attention to the war of words between the Prime Minister and Elon Musk. Far-right attacks should be seen as terrorism. Words from a leading former police chief. That's the headline from The Guardian. The Financial Times reports on the global stock market tumble over fears of a US recession. The Sun has an interview with Andrew Flintoff after his return to cricket following a horror crash while filming Top Gear. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Jack Elsom and Jessica Elgott. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the front page of the Metro, and obviously it's going to be the riots that have been taking place, unfolding across the streets of the UK. And today we heard about the Prime Minister's crackdown, Jack.
Yeah, so the past few days, the Prime Minister has spent the past few days appealing for calm, obviously in the wake of all of these riots. But today, what is emerging is sort of more flesh on the bones about the actual sort of concrete measures, proactive measures, which the government is taking. And so Keir Starmer emerged from this Cobra meeting, which he held today. And at the heart of this plan is really this standing army, as he put it. So hundreds more specialist riot police deployed to hotspot areas, which we've seen taken over by thugs in the past few days. And obviously the first job of the state is to keep people safe, and heavy police presence in these areas I think will go some way to assuring people that the government hasn't lost control of this at the moment. But also on the other side, in terms of deterrence, is this big scaling up of prison places. So 500 more prison places are going to be available over the next few days. These sort of wings of prisons have been fast-tracked, and hopefully as charges and convictions follow for a lot of these rioting thugs, the actual threat of prison and going into cells will hopefully help quell some of this violence.
Jessica, do you think it's going to be enough of a deterrent?
I think we're already starting to see, and the numbers are still quite small, of people going into court and people expressing regret, pleading guilty to various charges. More and more pictures are kind of coming out of people, looking quite embarrassed as they're dragged away by police. And I think that is the sort of thing that will eventually start to seep through into people's consciousness about whether they should, go into a shoe zone and grab a pair of trainers, and whether that might lead to a lengthy prison sentence. But I mean, of course, we all know about the stretch that there is on prisons, and yes, they're finding these extra places. At the moment, the government's saying that it's not an issue to send people to prison. But we all know that only a few weeks ago they were saying that the prisons were basically at breaking point.
We move on to the Eye. Their headline, UK to deploy standing army of riot police, but officers fear shortages. And only this evening, I don't know if you've seen our pictures from Plymouth, what's been unfolding there. And the Bronze Commander, the chief officer in charge of the tactics at the site in Plymouth, was saying that really they didn't have the resources to police as they should be policing.
Yeah, and it almost seems to be a bit of whack-a-mole at the moment, in terms of the broad numbers of police in the country, they obviously have enough to massively outnumber these rioters. But when they turn up in different parts of the city, they're very well organised, as the Prime Minister has made clear. And it's that immediate response which I think the police are having to grapple with. Obviously, the government always has that option of bringing in the army. They said today that actually they don't believe, or the police don't believe, that is necessary at the moment, although it's always something, obviously, in the periphery. And, over the next few days, and hopefully not, but even weeks, pressure, if the police don't get a grip on this, is going to only grow for that lever to be pulled, I think.
And there's always a kind of middle ground option for that you can get the army to do the kind of things that, like guarding Parliament, for example, or guarding sort of sites of special interest, which police officers are currently doing, freeing up frontline officers. That's a kind of middle ground that they could eventually pursue in the coming days if things don't calm down.
We've seen nearly 400 people arrested in connection with the unrest, and as you say, perhaps as more of those go through the criminal justice procedure, that might serve as a deterrent. But for the moment, when we look at the pictures, the crowds are very brazen about going up to the officers, being confrontational, throwing missiles. There were fireworks set off in Plymouth this evening, seeing one individual there being taken off, injured. Dogs have been deployed. I mean, it completely is chaos. It is like a war zone.
Yeah, and this is the point which the CPS, the government, the police are really trying to stress to these rioters, is that we will find you, and this could ruin your life. You could be in prison for a number of years. It could affect your job opportunities, is what the chief prosecutor said today. Kids as young as 14 being arrested. And I think that people need to take a long, hard look at themselves when they do march up to the barrier where riot police are, and even when you're wearing a balaclava, people being able to be traced and identified. And so I really think that people need to sort of have a long, hard think before they do that, because what you think is maybe engaging in a bit of sort of mob mentality could spell you quite a hefty prison sentence.
Yeah, and they're not even wearing masks, not even bothering to cover their faces. They seem to be very happy to sort of have their faces on camera. Quite extraordinary, really, when you look at those pictures.
I mean, the police were actually asking people to remove their masks, but that fell on deaf ears. That was a development today, but they took no notice. But on the point of young people perhaps having their lives ruined by this madness that they might have taken part in, Stephen Parkinson, the Director of Public Prosecutions, he warned that children who get involved in disorder could face lifelong consequences, as you were saying. One of the most striking features of the current outbreak of disorder is that many young people are involved, children as young as 11. This is deeply disturbing. They may face lifelong consequences, conviction and a permanent record of their involvement on the police national database. This can limit their employment options in the future and ability to travel to certain countries. I mean, this is really very serious.
Yeah, we talk about, people on the far right going out and protesting, but a lot of these protests, it seems, is just like bored teenagers in the summer holidays that want a bit of a tear-up and give the police a runaround. Potentially they've had drinks and drugs, but, it does seem that at the moment, a lot of them are just, delinquent teenagers out and about for a bit of a scrap. And, Stephen Parkinson makes the point in that, OK, listen, this may seem all sort of fun and games at the time, but in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, you could be massively regretting this moment. So just stop and think before you chuck a Coke can or worse over a police officer.
Absolutely. Let's move to the Mail and this online row between Elon Musk and the Prime Minister. He's been quoted on social media as saying that civil war is inevitable in the UK because of what's going on the streets.
And yes, so Elon Musk, who's the owner of X, the formerly Twitter, was replying to a video that was posted. It was originally posted, but then grabbed again by someone else, but originally posted by Tommy Robinson. And he replied to it, showing disorder in Liverpool, saying civil war is inevitable. And the PM spokesman was asked about that today in the lobby briefing to journalists, and he said there was no justification for comments like that. And he sort of went on to criticise, saying that, of course, these people don't represent anything to do with the vast majority of people in Britain. And it's quite a strong response, I would say. You don't normally you would see government spokespeople kind of shy away from making a kind of direct rebuttal about particularly sort of individuals or individual comments. But obviously, Elon Musk is a very influential person because of the way that X functions, the way that, you know, you can information or even disinformation on that can spread very, very quickly. And so he's obviously seen as a person that Downing Street feels it's worth kind of taking on the arguments that he's trying to make.
It's very interesting, isn't it? And like Jessica said, you know, it was only last year that the British government were rolling out the red carpet for Elon Musk, and Rishi Sunak was almost sort of, you know, falling over himself to try and ingratiate himself, exactly, in a sort of chat show interview. We do know that Elon Musk shoots from the hip and that he's declared war on the woke mind virus, and so potentially he comes as more of a sort of a right-wing voice in this. But, you know, stirring this up on his own platform just seems, you know, pretty unnecessary. And also, you know, the fact that he's talking about civil war in this country, you know, we're not really known for our revolutions, are we, in Britain? So I don't think, you know, that was incredibly helpful.
Let's want to take you now to a statement from Devon and Cornwall Police on the violence that we've seen on the streets of Plymouth this evening. Let's have a listen to that.
We continue to police in ongoing events in Plymouth with a high visible police presence. Specialist officers were deployed to the Guildhall in the city centre at around 3:30 p.m. today. During the evening, we've seen levels of violence across the city and several officers have sustained injuries. I would like to reassure the community that we are fully resourced at this time with a strong police presence. Violence will not be tolerated, hate will not be tolerated, and we continue to work with our partners to keep the people of Plymouth safe. Our approach to this operation was to enable peaceful protests, but people who are intent on committing public order and criminal offence have and will be dealt with robustly. This is the style of policing that we have delivered this evening and what our communities of Plymouth expect. Sadly, a number of individuals see fit to cause disorder. This type of behaviour is unacceptable within our communities, and our officers are fully trained to manage and de-escalate disorder as quickly as possible. The majority of people have behaved within the law, and I would like to thank them for this. We will continue to take positive action against individuals who commit offences and have carried out arrests for a range of public order offences and assaults.
Superintendent Russ Dorr there. Coming up, we'll be talking about Team GB's success at the Olympics today. Do stay with us.
I got my Guinness World Record right here for the longest handstands on a skateboard. It is just so incredible. To be honest, I just had it in me ever since I was younger, and I have an upper body strength that is so, I mean, every day I walk on my hands or use my hands and arms and upper body, and I just felt like, man, I want to do an attempt to for a record or something. And now here I am, and Guinness World Records came out to me and was just like, hey, would you want to do a record, like any record you want? And I was like, yeah, let me see what I can do. And I'm always up for a challenge and competition. So I kind of managed to do it. I can do it longer, but I feel like this is actually like one of the longest attempts that I have done. My friends say I can do longer, and who knows, maybe I'll beat that battle. I just love skateboarding and wanted to show people that my motto, no legs, no limits, anything is possible. And so with Guinness World Records and creating that reflect and having 19.65 seconds as a female LA3 is incredible. And it shows my motto, no legs, no limits. There's no limits to anything. And I want to encourage other people out there that if you set your mind to whatever you want to do, you can do it. And as long as you get out there and try and do it, you can really do anything, whether you have legs or not. I feel like everyone has their own superpowers, and one of them is helping people, but also motivating others, but also I'm just living my life. I don't care what anyone thinks, and I just thrive on what I love doing. And I just feel like maybe ever since being found on the side of the road as a baby and being raised with nurses and amazing women in my life, and especially my mom, she's an incredible woman. That journey kind of created me to be also like a strong, independent woman who I am today. And I feel like it's just me. I always been independently strong. I want people to ask questions, and I would love to tell about my story like I am today and doing now, and inspiring other people to do the same when they feel doubtful or they feel like they can't do much because of their disabilities.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Jack Elsom and Jessica Algott. Let's take a look at the Financial Times and this story concerning Rachel Reeves, which I think is basically about her using a different definition for debt in order to balance the books. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, exactly. So we're all trying to work out how is Rachel Reeves going to get through this budget in the autumn? How is she going to find that 22 billion black hole if she's ruled out a lot of the kind of main tax-raising measures that she could use? She's obviously not that predisposed to massive spending cuts. So is there a bit of creative accounting that she could be doing? And the Financial Times is floating that to her. And she's on a trip to the US, and she hasn't ruled it out, as we often say when we're trying to say whether something is a possibility or not. And essentially this is about discounting some of the ways that the Bank of England sells bonds, and could you take that out of the way you calculate debt? Might that therefore mean you can meet your fiscal rules, very important fiscal rules that she's stressed a lot, without breaking them, and therefore you can spend a bit more, borrow a bit more?
So it could allow the Chancellor to borrow 17 billion more.
Yeah. That would certainly help fill the black hole.
Massively so. I mean, it's a bit of jiggery-pokery at the end of the day, isn't it? But if it allows...
Is that a technical term?
I think so, yeah. That's a stupid political encyclopedic term, jiggery-pokery. But in terms of, you know, she's boxed herself in massively. She's in a really tight spot because ever since she committed to these fiscal rules, actually, you know, first proposed by Jeremy Hunt, it means her ability to borrow is almost nothing. And so when you're looking at trying to recoup the money for that black hole, this is obviously going to go some way to doing it. We obviously expect some sort of tax rises as well. I think she's basically all but confirmed that. But she's ruled out the three main revenue raises of VAT, national insurance and income tax. And so she's going to be scrambling around for any kind of other way she can bring money into the exchequer, whether that's inheritance tax or some sort of capital gains tax. You know, it's all going to come to a head on October 30th.
Jessica, also on the front page of the Financial Times, global stock markets fall sharply. Markets certainly spooked today.
Yes, and this seems to be fuelled by sort of two main things, which has been a quite unexpected jump in the unemployment rate in the US, and also that the US Federal Reserve decided to sort of stick as it was with interest rates and not cut them. I think the markets were perhaps expecting a cut, and there's JP Morgan here, representative, calling it a market tantrum. And saying that this is basically the market trying to push the Fed into making a different decision. So potentially that could fuel a recession. I think there were some people saying there's a chance of it pushing what had been going great guns, actually, the US economy into recession.
Hadn't it? I mean, it's actually going gangbusters under Joe Biden, and now he's handed the reins over to Kamala Harris. You know, it could just tip into recession. Well, Donald Trump's already having a field day with this, dining out on it, saying prosperity with Trump, or you know, Kamala crashed in the greatest depression in 100 years or so. In terms of the FTSE as well today, I think £40 billion was wiped off the FTSE companies in today's trading.
Yeah, when the US sneezes, then everywhere else catches the cold.
Exactly. Should we do a bit of Olympics?
Definitely.
We've had a good day. Who wants to take us into this?
Well, I basically had the entire day off, so I spent the entire day on my sofa, glued to the television screen. I just managed to watch Keely Hodgkinson
as we were coming
win,
in,
exactly,
yes,
as we were
yes.
coming in. I was watching it on the car on the way here. Absolutely fantastic. She's basically only got silver medals, I think, throughout her entire career, and she was just, like, so desperate to get a gold in the 800 metres final today, and she finally did it, and she did it by a pretty convincing win as well, so everyone was smiles for that.
Yeah, she was tipped to...
She was tipped to win,
Take
exactly.
away
But, you know, it's never easy, is it? It's never easy.
It was great to see
additional
her
pressure.
I couldn't do it.
Streak ahead, like in those final few moments. She just really sort of opened up space, and it was, and the look on her face was pure joy. It was fantastic to watch.
You can say pure gold there.
Pure gold.
That was your cue. Jack and Jessica, thank you so much for picking through the papers. We shall see you in the 11 o'clock hour. In the meantime, let's take a look at the weather for you now.